Greetings YouTube, welcome back to the Madonna channel. I am Marcus, bringing you another video called Cardfight Overdress. Because at this point, I don't care anymore. Because just today, not too long ago, we have confirmation of what Viamance Bruce is going to do in DBT09. And that is gonna put a smile to my face. Look at the Bruce smiling there. Yeah, that's also me smiling. Although I don't have that kind of teeth. In any case, in this video, we'll be going through whatever is presented to us by the first episode of the next season of Cardfight Vanguard D standard. And we will try to break down what Viamance Bruce brings to the table, be it the good, the bad, as well as the mediocre. We will talk through all of that in this video, and hopefully you'll be able to understand what the future will mean for Bruce as well as the support moving forward. And one first thing that I need to say is that luckily Viamance Bruce actually continues the trend of final rushing, because there's a lot of you actually comment down that you are very sad to see final rush go. Don't worry, final rush is here to stay. But it's not only final rush, we actually got another keyword called final burst, which is an even more broken skill, I would say. But at this point in time, we still do not know how broken it can be. I hope not too broken. Now with that out of the way, let's get into Bruce himself. And of course, before I even read through Viamance Bruce's skill to you, I need to make a very small disclaimer. I only base on whatever is in the anime, what was being shown to us in the anime, what the skill does, what does it cost to activate the skill, what requirement it needs to activate the skill from the first episode of the anime showcase during the live stream. I basically grabbed one of my Japanese speaking friend and we just sat there and watched countless times to basically get everything right. I'm pretty sure that this is what Bruce is gonna do. Of course, the official card may look very different from what I have at this point, but I am very positive that this is basically like 80% of what Viamance Bruce is gonna do. First skill, Auto Vanguard Circle. At the beginning of your battle phase, if all of your units have Diabolos in their card name, until the end of your opponent's next turn, you final rush. And if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you final burst as well. Second skill, Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attack, if you are in final burst, cost Counterblast 1, choose a column, then all of your rear guards with Diabolos in its card name in that column, and they get 5k power until the end of turn. The first skill basically tells you that final rush has just been moved up to turn 3. Turn 3 final rush, who doesn't want that? Although it might come as a little bit of a nerve more than it's giving you the advantage. Well, yes, you're able to final rush a turn earlier, but then there's like a weird restriction of that final rush activation needs you to have all Diabolos unit, which means that you can no longer use Marjorie, Protobub, Gear Dober, as well as some other, support cards that Bruce currently have, which is a shame. But then again, we can't expect the first wave of support for Final Burst to be on the same level as Chronojet. There's no way. Unless, of course, you are Chronojet, then that's a different story. So, come back to Viamance Bruce himself. As mentioned before, we get a turn 3 final rush turn, which means that cards like Eden, Leonard, Derek, as well as some other cards could gain the potential 5k power on the third turn, which means that you're able to hit over any grade 3 that is on the field. And this includes the Vanguard, which is very, very nice. And of course, with the activation timing of Final Burst, going second in that one game is actually very, very powerful. What this means is that if you go second, you're able to get the final rush and the final burst, because most of the time your opponent is going to be at grade 3 already. But technically, this card is still a turn 4, because the second skill is actually a turn 4 skill. If you go first, that is. If you go second, then yeah, you are able to activate it on turn 3, which is very, very disgusting. And not only that, the restanding skill is a slight nerf to the regular Bruce, because Violence Bruce restand both of the front or rear guards, whereas this Viamance Bruce only restands whatever Diabolos you have in that one column. You are basically sacrificing one attack to restand a full column, and that whole column gets a 10k, which is very, very nice. But at the same time, you have to understand, since we do sacrifice one attack, it's not really that great, because we're coming from a 5 attack deck and suddenly back down to 4 doesn't really feel very Brucey. But then again, you have to understand here is that if you are going second with this Bruce, and if he does still retain stand the front row rear guards, I'm telling you, Bruce here is going to be so insanely broken. Although it's just the first wave, but mark my words, the support in this set is just disgusting. It's just gonna be disgusting, trust me. Although if it turns out to be not disgusting, then yeah, you know who to insult. With this being restanding only one column, it means that Eden, the first main attacker that Bruce actually have, is going to be the main attacker. It's the more threatening unit to restand because whenever Eden restands, if you are in Final Rush, he's able to gain a crit. Alongside a 8k vanilla at the back, Eden is able to hit for 23 on the first swing, and then when restand, he's able to hit for 33. Plus 10 if you do personal, right? So it's at the maximum, he's gonna attack for 43 without any triggers and 2 criticals, which is quite kind of decent if you ask me. So if you don't have Eden, you're gonna have a hard time finding him. And I think by the time you watch this video, Eden should be rising in price already. In any case, that's basically what Bruce does. It's a little bit of a twist in terms of the skill. You basically sacrifice something in order to gain, you know, some form of offensive power. But I actually have 2 questions for Bruce here to answer once the official skill for Bruce is out. The first one, of course, is that we do not actually know if this card actually costs soul. The Counterblast one is most likely confirmed, but it's only a subtle hint inside that episode. That's the first one. The second one, of course, is we are not sure if Final Burst lasts till the opponent. We currently are not sure whether or not Final Burst lasts till the opponent's turn, because Final Rush here does last until the opponent's turn, and this is actually a huge deal in terms of defense for Bruce, because there are some cards that gains power as long as you are in Final Rush. It does not care whether it's your turn or the opponent's turn. As long as you're able to Final Rush, they actually gain the power, which in turn does helps you a lot in terms of your defense. So that's basically Bruce, and to me, I am very excited, and I think this Bruce is very unique in his own way due to the fact that this Bruce actually opens up more room for creativity in terms of designing skills, whereas the Violence Bruce, you're basically stuck to the turn 4 mechanic, which from a design perspective is really not that great if you ask me. But that is it for Bruce. Next we have Diabolos Knuckel Jamie. I think that's his name. Continuous Rigor Circle. If you are in Final Burst, this unit gets power 10k. Second skill auto, when this unit is placed on Rigor Circle, cost Counterblast 1, Soul Charge 1. Choose one card from your soul and call it to Rigor Circle. This card I think is like a slightly powerful Lily, which is this card over here. Both of these cards does almost the same thing. Both of them cost the same cost, which is Counterblast 1. But of course Lily does Soul Charge 1 extra soul as opposed to only 1 Soul Charge for Jamie. In terms of the soul count, is basically 1 for 1. You basically Soul Charge 1 and choose 1 rearguard to call out to Rigor Circle. Potentially you'll want to call out like your attackers, for example your Eden as well as another Jamie potentially. I mean, he is a 20k attacker if you are on Final Burst. It's a very decent attacker too, and not to mention, since you are able to restand, he makes a very good candidate to restand as well. And not only that, you could potentially call other units. For example, Bad Steve is a 13k booster, which is also very nice. It depends on what your soul looks like, to be honest. Your soul can be like very crappy and very good at the same time. Not much is known for this card. We only know like a very baseline of it, because I still think there's possibly some room to make this card really great, or maybe some more restriction to make it like balance a little bit. So a few questions that I have for this card is, does the 10k power actually last until the end of turn? Or maybe is that if you are in Final Burst, you just get the 10k, which makes this a 20k rearguard base. So it's not really that easy to get rid of him, which sometimes is nice, but at the same time, I highly doubt that this is going to be a 20k base if you are in Final Burst. And this is also depends on if Final Burst lasts until your opponent's turn. So that's another thing to think about. Next, of course, is does this have a Final Rush skill? In the first episode, we don't really see Dungy actually call this card out during the Final Rush turn, which makes me think maybe he only has a Final Burst, which is the power bonus. This card could be very bad or could be very good. But of course, as time progresses, once we get the official card, everything will be answered. The next one, of course, is whether or not you need Final Rush to call something out from the soul, or you can only call Diabolos unit from the soul. Those are the more important question, because if this card is not restricted to call Diabolos, each and every deck inside Dark States is able to use this card, which I think Bushiro does not want. The last one, of course, is going to be, does this need to be called from hand or just place? If this card is just place, it means that you are able to basically chain call the entire board. Depends on what is in your soul, which will technically make Viamance Bruce soul like a second hand, because you want to to soul charge as much as possible to potentially build up that soul reserve for your important units to be called, and then just use either Julian's skill or Jamie's skill to call them out, which is very, very nice. But of course, there's the more important one, is whether or not the superior call of this card need to be called on top of an open rearguard circle or a rearguard circle, because both of these actually matters a lot. It's basically the difference between a multi-attack or basically just get more value out of the superior call. So this is the baseline that I know from the anime that this card is doing. He's a very decent, and I think he is very good. Next is the Great One Succubus, Diabolos, Madonna, Tracie, whichever Tracie you want to spell. I'm guessing she's a Madonna because, you know, most of the girls within Diabolos is Diabolos Madonna, except for a few exceptions. Either way, I'm just gonna put Madonna here. The only skill that the anime episode actually show is only her gaining the 5k shield when you are in Final Rush. That's it. So there's nothing really much we know about this card other than, you know, this being a defensive shield. She's a defensive 10k shield, which I think is going to be very niche in terms of usage, but this depends on what the other skill is. I highly doubt that this unit is only a 10k meat shield. I don't think this is just a 10k shield. I think there is like another skill that potentially make this unit like a really great unit. But then again, we're still a long way to go for DBT09 to be revealed, so this is the best that they can give us. So I don't know. Of course, questions once again. Does this unit have a final burst skill, which is most likely going to be the second skill of this card? So if this unit has a second skill and if it has a final burst, does this unit actually gains power? If this unit gains power, it makes sense why Dungy would call this card behind Eden. Last but not least is the shield value. Can the shield bonus activate on put? Because right now it says on place, because this is a great one, you cannot intercept, but who knows, this card might just get an intercept from back row or stuff, and then, you know, if this card gets an intercept, most likely the shield bonus actually does activate when this unit is on put. So these are the 3 cards that was actually featured in the anime episode. So in terms of attacker, these are the attackers that could be very deadly, but then again, attacker, you only have like 2 rearguard circle for you to call them on, so it's gonna be quite limited in terms of who you want to play inside Viamance Bruce. Eden, for sure, you're gonna run 4 copies of him. He is just disgusting in this deck. Although he is really disgusting in the OTK build for the Great 4 Bruce. But in this deck, I think he is possibly going to be the main attacker. Next, of course, Julian. Julian, he's just basically there to give you value after value after value. But because we do not get access to Proto Bulb, yeah, we actually lost the ability to multi-attack a little bit. I mean, attack more than 4 times. So we might need to wait until like a Diabolos Proto Bulb to be revealed. Only then Julian might be played. But for now, I think Julian is not too bad. I think you're better off running Jamie instead of Julian because, you know, Julian still needs to depends on how many damage you have, which sometimes could be not really that great. Next, Megan. There's no right or wrong in running Megan. Megan, she's just a very thick rearguard to attack. She's a 20k on the first swing and 30k on the second swing. Yeah, she is very good if you want your rearguards to hit like very huge numbers. But the only difference here is that, the only thing that holds her back is due to the fact that she does not get the crit. Unlike Eden here, he will be slightly smaller, but his main selling point is the crit, which will basically force your opponent to either PG or throw even more hands down, depending on how the game state is. But Megan, if your opponent is at 5 damage, Megan's value suddenly shuts up because she's just gonna get bigger and bigger the more times she attacks. So she's a very decent card as of now to be played inside this deck. The next one, of course, is Warren. This card is here is because we don't really use a lot of Counterblast just yet. The only Counterblast that we may be using is, of course, Viamance Bruce himself, Jamie himself, and if you do plan to use Eden's skill, that's 1, and then if you're planning to use Julian, that's 4. Actually, we do use quite a lot of Counterblast. Never mind. I'm just putting this card here is because we don't get access to the dog. Unfortunately, Geardobber does not make it to this list because, you know, Geardobber isn't really a Diabolos unit. This card could potentially fulfill that spot because when he attacks Counterblast 1, choose another unit and +10. I don't think he's going to be great in the long run, but then again, this is also depends on what the support for Viamance Bruce in this set will look like. Do we get counter charge? Do we get, you know, stuff that basically minus the Counterblast cost a little bit? I don't know. But for now, he is decent, but I won't really like put him in like the main must-run card that you will need. I'm just putting it here to basically shed some light on this unit. He might be useful at this point, judging from how many counterblast that you will be using, I don't think he will make the cut. But he is one of the units that you should be wary about. The next is Nate. Nate, the bottom first card, grade 3 here. He is a 18k attacker, and he is actually a front row attacker, meaning that when he attacks, he's gonna hit all 3 front row targets if you are in Final Rush and the cost of Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1, which makes him has some value, because for sure you will have like that one column that will not be attacking until after you attack with the other column and then Vanguard to restand that column. Then maybe he will attack. I think this card can be put in. It still depends on how much soul you will be using for Viamance Bruce. This card could potentially be very dangerous if your opponent has like a front row of very important units, in particularly Eva. Eva likes to leave her husband in the front row anyway, so this unit can potentially like wipe them out, and they just lost their show, which is very, very nice. Of course, Nate as well as Warren, these two cards are still subjected to whether or not how much resources are we gonna use. If we do not use a lot of resources, I think these two cards can be played, but I think I would prefer Nate more than Warren, because Warren does cost quite a bit of counterblast. I would rather pay that one counterblast to clear out the board, if you ask me, but that's a personal preference thing. Next, DeAndre here is more like a very late game call target, because for every 2 damage zone you gain a 10k. If you manage to call him out by using either Julian or Jamie's skill, he is going to be a 30k body alongside an 8k vanilla, potentially Stacy. He's going to be at 38, and after restand he's going to be at 48, which is going to be really huge. But the only problem here is how do you want to put him into soul? That's the main issue. The only way for you right now is to randomly soul charge into him. Otherwise, he would most likely be a dead card with nothing on the board helping you putting him to soul. I mean, there are ways to put him to soul, but the problem here is that you risk into not being able to, you know, activate Final Rush. Last but not least is Leonard. Leonard, I feel, is the weakest one out of all these attackers because of the fact that he is restricted to Violence Bruce, that is, because you will need to have the regular Bruce, only then he's able to superior call stuff from the soul, which you will definitely won't be riding the regular Bruce. So you're basically just clearing columns, but in most cases I find him to be very hindering, because the fact that he's forced to soul charge every time he attack hits, so your opponent could potentially take advantage of him. The only positive side is that during turn 3, when you go into your battle phase, Leonard as well as Eden is going to be a 15k even on your opponent's turn, because their skill only says if you are in Final Rush they gain a 5k, meaning that they will not be easily get rid of, which is a good thing if you ask me. But Leonard, I think, is going to be the weakest one due to how clunky he is. And you know, I think Bushiroad, I think, kind of effed him up a little bit because of, you know, the restriction to Violence Bruce. So these are all the attackers that you might consider getting, but at the same time, this is only like the very early stages of the reveals for Bruce. We might get some more attackers that is going to be really strong, maybe not to the level of Eden and Megan. The next one, of course, is like Diabolos unit that actually has like a power up or an extension to basically combo into your pieces. The first one, of course, is, as mentioned before, is Lily. Lily functions the same way as Jamie. Lily is essentially a dead card after he's being called. He's basically a 15k, and the next turn he's just dead. He's not doing anything after that. So at least I think Jamie is much better in that sense, because he is still a 20k body. Although you don't get the superior call stuff, he is still a 20k body, which is way better than what Lily is doing. But it's still subjected to what your soul is going to look like. The next one, of course, is going to be Jared. Jared here is forgotten for some reason due to how lackluster he is. Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1 choose a Diabolos unit and gets a 10k. I think this is why I put this here, because the 10k can be given to each and any Diabolos unit. Since this deck will be played primarily Diabolos, I think he is not bad. And the second skill is not really that great, because he's only there to prevent any intercept. Only certain decks you will want to prevent intercept. For example, Tamayura, or maybe the Grade 4 Magnolia. But other than that, I think the main selling point of this card is the first skill and not the second skill. You definitely will not want to restand him because he's not that great. But he is an option and a very good one. The next two cards are great, but the problem here is that these two cards are active, meaning that you can only use their skill in the main phase. And the problem here is that Final Rush only activates during the battle phase, which means that you would technically miss your chance to using these two cards. Although Brian could actually pay 2 Soul Blasts to give the front row 5k, but you will definitely never get the crit unless something changes. For Derek, he's mostly there just for, you know, retire 1 for every 4 cards in the soul. But why would you want to do that? It's basically a -1, so I don't think you want to run Derek, but I'm just putting him here just for the off cases that he's going to be really broken, depending on how Final Rush is worded on Viamance Bruce. Next is utilities. This is basically primary grade ones where, you know, they basically help you set up your insanely stupidly powerful combo turn. The first one, of course, is everyone's favorite Mabel. Mabel Counterblast 1 to give the Vanguard triple drive. Who does not want that? Now, Mabel here is much more like an offensive utility. You can go for an offensive as well as defensive route, which is the next card, Stephanie. Stephanie here, similar to Eden as well as Leonard, the 5k power boost here lasts until when you are not in Final Rush, meaning your opponent's turn. So her skill basically gives whatever is in the same column as her the 5k power, as long as you are in Final Rush. What this means is that even if you end turn and pass the turn to your opponent, the 5k still remains. So as long as your opponent does not retire Stephanie, your Vanguard is going to be at 18k base, which I think the anime went through a great length to explain how devastating this can be. Maybe against Gravidia decks, I think it's not a problem, but those that do not have retiring skills, yeah, those are the decks that is gonna be very headache. The next one is Ivanka. Ivanka here, I don't know. Other than her providing the on-hit pressure, because you do restand the whole column and basically return that attacker back to bottom deck to draw 1. I don't think she's really that great. I mean, she does give another unit the 5k power, but the problem here is that I don't think you will want to run her. Possibly going to be much better units that will be revealed down the line, but this card is pretty decent and most of the time she's not that great. Last is Kristen. Kristen here, just in case Viamance Bruce actually need 5 soul. Since we do not have Doggo as well as Marjorie, and we don't even get to use Pandemonium, I think this is your best chance of soul charging. For every 2 cards in the damage zone, you get to soul charge 2, a total of 4 soul charge in 1 turn. I think it's pretty much okay. Now, like DeAndre, you will need to find ways for you to basically put her into the soul. There are cards that could help you to do that, but at the same time, you run the risk of not, you know, being able to activate Final Rush. That card is a Diabolos card. I think Future Me will be putting up here right now. That card could put one of your rearguards to the soul and Superior Call the top deck. But the problem here is that not every trigger that you have is going to be Diabolos. I mean, sure, you could run like a full Diabolos triggers, but you won't be able to run like the draws. I think the draw one is the big one. Crit, not really that much in this deck at least. So technically you can use that card, but then again, it's not really that great. Nah, you're better off running other stuff. Next, of course, we need to talk about cards that is unsuitable for the current Viamance Bruce. All 3 major order cards for Bruce: Hellblast Full Dive, Pandemonium Tactics, as well as Helheim Fervent Rage. These 3 cards, because of the fact that they are order card and can only be activated in the main phase, and they need Final Rush. And since Final Rush only activates at the battle phase, these 3 cards, unfortunately, could not be used. Unless, of course, they make another change to Viamance Bruce skill. If that is the case, I'm telling you, Hellblast Full Dive is here to stay. He is that stupid of a card. Helheim Fervent Rage is actually not that bad either. And of course, the last 3 units that is not really that suitable is going to be Protobub, Marjorie, as well as Doggo. Primarily because they are not Diabolos. If Viamance Bruce does not have that restriction, I'm telling you, people are still going to play Protobub, Marjorie, as well as Dober. I know I am going to run. They are just really good, but unfortunately, due to them not being Diabolos, it's very sad. And that is all for this video. Do let me know down in the comment section on what do you think of the new Viamance Bruce. As you already know, I am very excited for Viamance Bruce, and I will possibly play test this like crazy, or maybe I'll just get bored and move on. Either way, I am equally very happy. Do like and subscribe if you like this video, of course, during the bell notification icon so that you don't miss a video I upload. With that being said, I'll see you all on the field.